Alright, I'm finally ready for the Red Dead Redemption 2 review. Before we get started though, I want to take the time to define a term which applies heavily to the video. That term is confirmation bias. The term confirmation bias refers to one's tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of a prior existing belief, and that effect can be applied heavily to this game review, and frankly to YouTube as a whole. In a great many circumstances, viewers will click on videos with a pre-existing and entrenched set of preferences or beliefs. Those preferences and beliefs impact what they click, and it will skew to either something they already agree with, or the inverse, something they disagree with strongly, and as such are already primed to disagree, put a thumbs down, etc., thus getting nothing out of the experience. With this review, I am intending to speak to those who are not coming in with a strong confirmation bias, or at least hoping to keep many viewers' minds open, even if they do have such a bias. The review is less aimed at those who have already owned and played the game, and more aimed at those who have not played it yet, and therefore require additional information or opinion in order to gauge their own interest levels. The value of this video will not be as high for those who exist within an echo chamber, and simply wish to hear glowingly positive praise of the game, since it does in fact have many flaws, contrary to what all of the 10 out of 10 star reviews that mainstream outlets would have you believe. But likewise, it is not a bad game. In fact, it is quite good, beautiful even, and thus this review will not be a controversy piece designed to stir up emotion by raking it over the coals or taking a contrarian approach. I've played well over 100 hours now, explored almost every single side quest, Easter egg, activity, and location that exists, and I will try to compile it into an accurate resource for any still uncertain potential players. I know that this is behind the curve for standard reviews. In fact, viewership will likely be a lot lower than if I just shat out a half-assed review days after launch based on a rushed, lightning-fast playthrough. But the reason for this is quite simple. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a work of art, and it deserves a thorough, calculated, and articulate review. Otherwise, it would be a disservice to what the game truly is. Part 1, and this part will be relatively spoiler-free. There are many different things that players look for in a single-player experience. These factors range from impactful choices to voice acting, atmosphere, mechanical polish, character development, pacing, and so much more. To start with, let's talk about detail. Red Dead Redemption 2 is one of the most detailed and precisely crafted Western gaming worlds you are likely ever to see. In fact, it's possibly the most detailed open world game ever, period. The tiniest of details have been thought of, right down to the arrows actually flexing in the target after being shot. The way in which bullets are pushed into the bandolier, some higher or lower in the loop, and even birds, in their own natural environment, independent from players, will actively hunt. The game truly feels like a living, breathing world that exists regardless of player interaction. Bounty hunters will ride by with a mark tied up and slung behind them. Hunters will take down animals. Lawmen will chase thieves and criminals, or bandits will rob citizens on the open road. And all of this happens around you all the time. The detail and the living atmosphere help immediately build up a sense of meaning, as if when you log out, the game actually continues, industry grinds forward, and the characters around you grow and mature in your absence. This brings us to character building. The game does an excellent job of slowly building up your emotional investment. Too many times in the modern industry, games fail to capture the emotional moments. Red Dead Redemption 2 does not fail. It spends a great deal of time artfully driving you to build up a connection with the main character, Arthur, and through his actions, build relationships that matter, relationships that have far-reaching ripple effects on the rest of the living world. The voice acting in most areas is impeccable. So good in fact, it's unlikely most conscious players will even think about it. The animations are smooth enough to hardly ever drag you out of your immersion, and in many encounters, the morality of choice seems to actually extend out past the in-game world to you as a gamer. For some, this may be less true, but I began at certain times to actually feel genuine regret over an action I had just taken, whether it was retribution for a crime unproven, or enforcing an agreement I did not believe in. More so than most other games out there, Red Dead Redemption 2 creates meaningful choice, not just because of its story impact, but because of your own reactions as a player. The story is that of a true Western, slow to build with intense action tying it together at key intervals. If you're like me, or many other players out there who like fast-paced run-and-gun action, there is plenty to go around, but at other times the game drives you in a calmer direction. There are a lot of following missions, by the way, where the game forces you to move at a slow, set pace and listen to lengthy conversations from other characters. Most of the time, it is easy to go with the flow, but other times having the game forcibly slow you down to a snail's pace without making it clear for how long or even why, it can get a little bit frustrating. The game has an act system where story progression leads you through a series of different chapters. The true open world portion does not begin until chapter 2, but once started, the world continues to expand over many hours. It is an intensely large map. In total, it takes hours to travel the entire perimeter, and even navigating across it, directly across it, can take 15 minutes or more in a lot of circumstances at full horse gallop. This would be boring, and indeed it can be at times, except for the way random events are seamlessly incorporated. Not only that, but there seem to be a ton of these encounters, and eventually you will begin to see them repeated, yes, and you'll start to memorize their format, but nothing really beats seeing a flaming wagon fly across the road as you're rushed from all sides by enemies that you made through previous choices. You can be held up at gunpoint or witness other high-profile robberies occurring around you, and your choices in those situations determine whether or not you receive or lose honor, what reward you get, or what impression a character will have of you, which can have a tangible impact later on down the line. The honor system is indeed an area where improvement could be made. Your actions at all times, regardless of witnesses, context, or intent, relate to your honor meter. If you loot a corpse in a completely isolated environment with no one around, you still lose global honor. If your honor rating were more used as a morality bar of sorts, that could work, but it still feels kind of wrong to have society be so clairvoyant that they can sense the actions you take at all times. Positive honor most certainly has far more benefits than negative, but the game tells the story of an outlaw, so it's up to the individual how they choose to play. After honor, it's logical we discuss the bounty system. This is another area where the game needs a bit of improvement. Generally speaking, the bounty system works fine. Actions that disturb the peace or witnessed crimes result in a bounty, which scales up based on successive crimes, and in the end, bounty hunters will be hired to track you down, posses can form, and it can lead to a constant sense of danger. At one point, I came up to a town, and across the road was an entire blockade of lawmen, bloodhounds, and all. To be fair, I had a 1500 bounty at the time. This encounter made me feel like a truly wanted man, and it was a difficult fight that ensued. In this type of circumstance, the bounty system works very well, but on a smaller scale, it kind of falls apart. While simply riding through a town, if you clip someone with your horse while riding even just remotely a bit too fast, they can report that crime. This leads to lawmen chasing you, a temporary inability to access shops or do quests, and a high level of annoyance. It's also quite hard to avoid the pedestrians too, since they sometimes jump right out in front of you, and when you swerve, they will still somehow end up in front of your horse's hooves. It needs a bit of work, but on the flip side, for those who like a strong degree of realism, it adds to the atmosphere by slowing you down in populated areas, forcing you to be careful of your surroundings for fear of upsetting society, and in that way it can also kind of be seen as a positive. When combat and action does ensue, the control scheme does leave a bit to be desired. Scrolling through the various item wheels is functional, yes, but at times a bit tedious. There are a lot of collectible items, weapons, and consumables, so it can get a bit overwhelming and lead you to be cycling through the wheels a bunch of times. Consumables themselves are ridiculously overpowered, but like so many other features, it is a dual-sided strength. On the one hand, going on a 45-minute killing spree while remaining totally invincible is completely unrealistic, but on the other hand, it can be really fun. So take that for what you will, it's just part of the game. The Deadeye system makes any fight at all feel like a cinematic western. It evolves over time, and despite it becoming truly and epically overpowered towards the end of the game, I found myself pretty much loving it the entire time. Alongside the Deadeye is a hefty amount of auto-aim assist that can be raised, lowered, or disabled, and though I've heard it voiced as a complaint by some, to me it's less of a concern. With so much intricacy, some systems are in fact more meaningful than others. Something like Deadeye is game-changing, but the stat cores, much less so. One can effectively allow their character to starve, or their horse as well, and suffer very little consequences because of it. They may regenerate slower, yes, but it still seems to have very little bearing on functionality. Likewise, the outfits for cold or warm weather, they're just ghosts of a system. It easily is just possible to go to any area with any outfit and see zero ramifications other than maybe slightly increased core drain rate, which is, as previously stated, negligible in its effect. These shadow systems do not hurt the game, but they are not as impactful as many think, and they sort of overcomplicate the surface level experience. If they were more emphasized and more critical, it would be great, requiring players to actively engage with them, but as it stands, they are just a sort of mosquito in your ear. The story arcs out wide with its ups and its downs, and without specifics, I will say that it has very satisfying and emotional moments of closure. Unlike many other games, you will end up caring about far more than just yourself and your own character. With so many activities to draw from, it is easy to lose yourself in side narratives and play hours on end without even advancing the main campaign. When a player finally does pull through the full main storyline, it must be mentioned that the game world feels a bit empty. Exploration is still amazing, dynamic events and lots to see, but spending time questing and exploring well before the conclusion of the main campaign is very much worth it. All the way through the early chapters is what I would honestly suggest. Take your time and look around. With the amount of content and its level of execution, Red Dead Redemption 2 is emblematic of what we should all want and expect from a AAA $60 game. It has many, many hours of enjoyment, artful execution, and a level of polish that is refreshing in modern gaming. It's not perfect, but it's damn good, and I wholeheartedly recommend it to open world fans, Western fans, and any gamer with an itch for a well-crafted, narrated, and developed storyline. We've now entered into a period of gaming history where Red Dead Redemption 2 will inevitably be used as a benchmark. Games will now be compared to it. The same way Dark Souls is often used as a synonym for, quote, difficult games, and even when unfair, it's not entirely bad to have such comparisons because the level of detail that Red Dead Redemption 2 displays, its usage of current hardware to the max, and its vast, sprawling open world with innumerable activities from legendary hunting and fishing to high-stakes poker, with all of that, it can effectively be used as a beacon of accurate pricing and expert craftsmanship. Where many other games fall short in one area or another, perhaps voice acting or animations or world detail, the list goes on, Red Dead Redemption 2 is ahead of the curve in nearly all of them, and it is this combination of well-executed factors that earn it a solid 9 out of 10. Awarding the game a 10 as a statement isn't the right thing to do, but recognizing its craftsmanship while accurately rating it is. Part 2. Here is where we get into the pretty heavy spoilers. I wanted to make sure that everyone watching had ample time to leave while still having a grasp of how good the game is, some of its minor flaws, and its overall appeal. But now we can talk about the most interesting and compelling sections of Red Dead Redemption 2 that make it so iconic. The story has two parts, one distinctly superior to the other, but both still quite good. At first, you play as the hardened and morally conflicted Arthur. For the first 6 chapters of the game, you build his character in whatever way you choose. To be a true outlaw or an honorable ruffian on the fringe of society, doing what he has to get by with his crew. Over time though, after a key event in the early stages of the game, it becomes clear that Arthur is sick. He's deathly ill, in fact. It's this slow burn plot that really pushed Red Dead Redemption 2 to the next level for me. Some of the key moments happen independent of you initiating any quest, and it all further develops the idea that the living, breathing world, even your own character, exists without you. After a long and slow deteriorating criminal existence, Arthur and the gang end up making a play for one last score. One last score, though, turns into one more, turns into still one more, and finally, after a slippery slope of tragedy and misfortune, it all ends for Arthur. I won't describe exactly how, or show it in the background for that matter, but I will say that your honor here, your honor level, it all pays off. Live as an outlaw, die as an outlaw. Live as an honorable man, well, we reap what we sow, essentially. After Arthur's passing, players move on to the life of John Marston, something longtime Red Dead Redemption fans will likely be pleased with. The epilogue is long, a bit too long in my eyes, but still, long enough to build a sense of meaning in Marston's life as he constructs a home for him and his wife Abigail. Their son sucks though, their son super sucks, he's really annoying, but anyways, moving on. In the final stages, after a lot of menial tasks like milking or shoveling shit, quite literally, Marston finally hunts down and kills the snake of the gang, the one responsible for all their chronic misfortune. And in a satisfying turn of events, the game concludes with a sense of justice, but also a twist of morality in a way I never really expected. Again, though I am spoiling huge things here, I won't spoil all of it or show it in the background. At that point, the world opens up again and players can free roam with John Marston. Some side quests are still available, but a large chunk are specifically tied to Arthur or they're time gated, so keep that in mind. If you do choose to explore the world and talk with various characters whose life Arthur touched or otherwise impacted in some way, Marston will tell them of Arthur, and the dialogue shared is just another example of a fully crafted living world that is on a completely separate level to most other competing games. The tale, all in all, outlines the death of an age. Dutch, Arthur, Marston, and the gang are being driven further and further to the fringes of society, not just by the law, but by modern American industry. Outlaws, once almost considered rock stars by some, are no longer able to exist. They fight back, and their struggle is heroic, but from all sides the world is changing, and it no longer allows them the freedom to carve out their own untouchable lives. It's these further layers of the story that make Red Dead Redemption 2 so amazing. When you peel them back, you find the core, and in that core is a different takeaway for every gamer. So that's something that warranted a mention. The game holds many positions, but it never once succumbs to the politics of our modern contemporary existence. Instead, it lets players drive their own story with options beyond belief, but none framed in such a way as to damage its own narrative and force a certain partisan agenda down your throat. In today's industry, that is worth mentioning specifically. It builds up strong characters, but not just one or two. It builds up many, and among those characters, you would be hard-pressed not to find one that you identify with, enjoy, respect, or generally like. And it's one of the most refreshing experiences on the market today, period. Rockstar hit a home run, from collectible cigarette cards and hidden Easter eggs to wild gunfights and fields on fire. Red Dead Redemption 2 has something for everyone, and though the game does have its flaws, it's earned a place in the Gaming Hall of Fame. Again, rating the game as a 10 out of 10 simply as a statement, like IGN or some other shit publication, is not the direction I want to go. Instead, I'd prefer to be as thorough as possible while still honoring how good the game is. 9 out of 10, with a big emphasis on it being truly, truly well crafted, is where I tend to land. That's going to wrap it up. This review did not deserve an advertisement, sponsor, or a merchandise plug. This time, I wanted to keep it clean. Check out the links down below if you want to support, but that's it. Have a nice night.